Here are some more mistakes beginners make with watercolor. This is a major one, overworking the paper. I use Arches 140-pound cold pressed paper, and the big sheets have a watermark in the corner. You can see it if you hold it up to the light. I always paint on the side where it's readable, but you can use the back too. In case you couldn't see the watermark before, here it is. Arches makes a great paper, and it can stand up to some abuse, but I thought I'd see how much it could take here. I'm drawing a little house, and most beginners tend to be shaky with their drawings, and they draw too darkly and erase a lot, so that's what I'm trying to simulate. A couple of peach-colored smudges are on the paper already. Those are fingerprints I put there on purpose, and fingerprints can be an annoying problem for a painter. They can become visible when you're painting and resist the paint. So I buy my paper online, in bulk and in pads. When you buy it one sheet at a time at an art store, who knows how many people have already touched it. So I've finally drawn the house the way I want it, but I've erased a lot, and now I can't decide what color I want to paint it. I'll be wiping it out with a paper towel and starting over repeatedly. Watercolor paper is made of cotton and coated with sizing. It's basically gelatin. Without the sizing, it would be like painting on a paper napkin. Arches has sizing in the body of the paper too, and it helps me lift colors and holds a good edge. But all of this scrubbing is causing the paper to pill like an old sweater, and the texture isn't the same. And this situation would be a lot worse on student grade paper. You need to have a good, light drawing and a color plan in mind before you start painting. Work out your drawing on a separate piece of paper and trace it onto the watercolor paper using a light box if drawing is difficult for you. The next problem, no premixing, is easy to solve. Let's say I'm painting a rose petal and I want to use the wet into wet technique. I've painted over the petal with water, and now I'm trying to mix the right color to drop onto the wet surface. But I'm having trouble mixing just the right yellow, and by the time I get it the way I want it, the water has dried on the petal and the yellow won't flow. The solution to this problem is obvious. Mix your color first. Then wet your surface down. And when you drop the color on it, the paint will flow and do beautiful watercolory things. The next problem, streaks in your flat wash. A flat wash should look like a solid, consistent color. Sometimes you need to make those when you're painting a sky or a wall, and they're surprisingly hard, especially when you're using a small brush and working slowly. Look at those streaks. I always try to paint a flat wash as quickly as I can. I wet the paper first, and using the biggest brush I'm comfortable with, I add the color, and sometimes I'll tip my board to get it to flow evenly. And I would never stop in the middle of this. There are certain times when I can't be interrupted when I work, and I'm almost always painting a flat wash. Next, no drying time, or in other words, you're working too fast. I'm painting a poppy here, and I have a fairly detailed drawing going on, especially in the center of the flower. There are hundreds of different ways to approach painting a flower, but let's say I want this to be realistic and with lots of details. Realism takes time, and with a flower like this, I would paint one petal at a time and skip around, allowing plenty of drying time before I started a neighboring petal. Here I'm just rolling through the petals, and it looks kind of fresh now, but the petals are becoming one big shape. Next, I'm adding a yellow-green center with a dark green accent. The rest of the center is a deep purplish black with blue highlights, and here's where I'm running into trouble. The petals are not dry at all, and the purple is out of control. It's kind of fun to watch, but now I've lost the center. The paint is pooling in the middle. And this is what it looks like dry. If you want to preserve details, you can't paint this quickly. Finally, let's talk about backruns. I'm going to paint a couple of flat washes here, purple and red. And if I wanted them to stay flat, I would let them dry completely before I painted anything next to them. But let's say I'm impatient and I want to add some wet paint next to them while they're still damp. What forms next is called a back run. Back runs happen when you put wet paint next to damp paint. Wet paint naturally wants to flow into paint that's drier, and you can see the magenta creep into the purple here. The same thing happens when I put the yellow next to the red. Wet paint always invades drier paint, and this is something you need to be aware of as a painter. Maybe you want to make this effect happen. Back runs are absolutely hypnotic to watch, but if you wanted the purple and red to stay solid, this is the wrong thing to do. Just like with the poppy, you need to allow for drying time. But yeah, those are still really pretty. I hope you enjoyed these tips. 5 more are on the way.